My impression, speaking to investors, speaking to analysts, is that one of the biggest surprises out of the Trump administration's announcement was Vietnam getting hit with a 46% tariff. And this has clearly sent shockwaves through stock markets, not only in Vietnam, but obviously in the U.S. and Europe, because it's such a manufacturing hub for so many clothing and footwear companies. Before we get to Vietnam specifically, though, what is your sense of how the Southeast Asian countries are likely to respond to these tariffs? Are they more likely to try to negotiate, or is there any chance of retaliation?
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's a very different approach here in the region compared to, for example, in Europe. They don't have as much bargaining power, so very difficult for them to retaliate with their own tariffs that might be increased. So I think the more likely approach would be to try and appease President Trump, negotiate with a combination of things like, pledges to ease some of these remaining non-tariff barriers, purchase more U.S. goods like airplanes, or, try and tell some of these local companies to invest more in the U.S. That's well and good, but I think the problem is execution might be very difficult. First of all, we don't know exactly what kind of thresholds will be enough for the president to allow these tariffs to be reduced for the region. And then, of course, I don't know if we're at the front end of the queue trying to negotiate with the U.S. So if you're at the back end of that queue, it means it will take time, which means that these very high tariffs in the region will stay for a while and therefore affecting their respective economies negatively.
Euben, when it comes to what these countries can do to get President Trump to back down, I want to look at Vietnam specifically, given its outsized importance in the supply chain for so many clothing and footwear manufacturers. When you talk about lowering non-tariff trade barriers, what exactly can Vietnam realistically offer here that would get President Trump to lower that 46% tariff?
Yeah, it's very difficult to say because in Vietnam's case, relative to the rest of the region, non-tariff barriers are already relatively low. And this is why in the past decade or so, Vietnam has been the recipient of all of these FDI inflows from all these multinationals, right? So I think, again, back to my point earlier, might be very difficult to sort of exactly figure out what steps can they take for actually the U.S. to say, okay, that's enough, and we can bring down the tariffs. Clearly, it's also geopolitical, right? And that's the other difficulty, because obviously, I would call 46% as China-like tariffs. So from a U.S. perspective, maybe they're seeing Vietnam as an extension of the manufacturing base of China. And therefore, to try and correct the trade imbalance in the U.S., they need to sort of target Vietnam as well. So that difficulty, again, presents a lot of uncertainty for a country like Vietnam to be able to sort of reduce these tariffs from the president.